When the US hit China with a fresh wave of tariffs, the expectation was simple. Economic pressure would force China to back down. But that's not what happened. Instead, China responded with a strategy that's been years in the making, targeting not just American products, but the foundation of America's economic influence. They've imposed tariffs on key industries, yes, but that's just the surface. Behind the scenes, China is securing critical supply chains, tightening its grip on rare resources, and cutting deals with US rivals to weaken America's leverage globally. This isn't about immediate retaliation. It's about shifting the balance of power over time. Today, we're breaking it all down: what's happening, why it matters, and how it's changing the world economy. In February 2025, the US set off economic tensions by putting new tariffs on over $60 billion worth of Chinese goods. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was part of Trump's ongoing push to bring back American manufacturing. The new tariffs hit key areas: computer parts, electric vehicle materials, and basic resources needed for modern technology. The goal was to pressure China into changing its trade practices. But the reality, it sparked a response that went far beyond simple trade. While the US framed it as protecting American jobs, China saw it as an attack, not just on its economy, but on its position in the world. China's answer wasn't rushed or emotional. Within days, they announced tariffs targeting $35 billion in American goods, focusing on farming, energy, and cars. But it's not just about what they targeted, it's about where. China focused on industries tied to important political regions in the US. Soybeans from the Midwest, oil from Texas. This wasn't just about hurting the economy. It was about creating pressure from inside the US, knowing that affected businesses would push back against these policies. But that's just one part. Beyond tariffs, China made new trade deals with countries like Brazil, Russia, and even Mexico, finding new suppliers to reduce their need for American goods. While the US was focused on applying pressure, China was quietly building a new strategy. While most people focused on tariffs, China quietly used one of its strongest economic tools: rare earth minerals. These are needed to make things like smartphones, electric cars, and even military equipment. China controls over 80% of the world's supply. After the new US tariffs, China hinted it might limit the export of these materials to the US. This wasn't just a warning. It was a smart move to put pressure on industries the US depends on, for both business and security. Think about trying to build advanced technology without the raw materials needed to make it work. That's the kind of quiet but powerful pressure China is using, not with loud threats, but with control over the resources the world relies on. China didn't stop with farming products. They went after America's energy industry, adding new taxes on US oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG. This matters because China was one of the biggest buyers of American energy in recent years. The impact was quick. US energy companies lost contracts, shipments were delayed, and profits dropped. At the same time, China shifted its focus, making energy deals with Russia, countries in the Middle East, and boosting its own energy production to rely less on the US. This isn't just a short-term issue. Even if tariffs are removed later, those new energy deals may stay in place. That means lost income and influence for the US in one of the world's biggest markets. While products like steel and soybeans get attention, the real fight is over technology. The US tried to limit China's access to advanced tech, banning the sale of important computer chips and blocking companies like Huawei from doing business with American firms. China's response: invest heavily in its own technology. The government poured money into making their own computer chips, improving artificial intelligence, and building faster 5G networks, all to reduce the need for US technology. But here's the twist. Instead of slowing China down, these actions may have made them stronger. Chinese tech companies are now creating products that can compete with or even outperform American ones. This isn't just a trade fight anymore. It's a race to see who will lead the future of global technology, and China is closing the gap fast. China holds over $800 billion US government debt, and while selling all of it at once would hurt China too. Even small changes in how much they buy can shake up the global economy. After the new tariffs, China quietly started buying less US debt. This caused a ripple effect, making it more expensive for the US government to borrow money, which can lead to higher interest rates for things like home loans, car loans, and credit cards. It's a quiet form of economic pressure, but it's very effective. The US relies on countries like China to help finance its debt. If China pulls back even a little, it creates money problems that can't be fixed with tariffs. One of China's smartest moves was building stronger relationships with other countries. While the US was adding tariffs, China was signing new trade deals with the European Union, Southeast Asian countries, and even closer partnerships with Russia and Latin America. The goal is simple: reduce dependence on the US while expanding China's influence in other markets. This isn't just about avoiding tariffs. It's about creating a global network where the US has less control. For American businesses, this means more than losing Chinese customers. It means facing new competition in markets where the US used to have an advantage. As China strengthens its position around the world, American companies may find it harder to keep up, while the US and China grab the headlines. Canada and Mexico were dealing with their own problems. Both were hit with US tariffs, which led them to respond with tariffs of their own. Canada targeted American farm products, while Mexico added taxes on things like steel, pork, and whiskey. But here's where it gets interesting. As tensions grew, both Canada and Mexico started building stronger trade relationships with China. This shift could weaken America's influence right in its own neighborhood, turning former close partners into countries that rely less on the US and more on China. One of the biggest impacts of this trade war isn't just the tariffs. It's how global supply chains are being reshaped. For years, the US and many other countries relied heavily on China for manufacturing. But with rising tariffs and tensions, companies are rethinking that strategy. China saw this coming. They've been investing in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and even parts of Africa to create new supply routes that don't depend on US partnerships. This not only helps China avoid future tariff risks, but also builds stronger ties with developing economies. For American companies, this means higher costs to shift production elsewhere and longer timelines to adjust. It's not just a short-term disruption. It's a permanent change in how goods are made and moved around the world. American farmers are some of the hardest hit in this trade war. China was one of the largest buyers of US agricultural products, like soybeans, corn, and pork. But after the tariffs, China slashed its purchases, turning to countries like Brazil and Argentina instead. For farmers, this meant crops with nowhere to go, falling prices, and rising debts. Some received government bailouts to cover the losses, but that's a temporary fix. The real problem is long-term. Once China finds new suppliers, they might not come back to American farms, even if tariffs are lifted later. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a political one. Farming communities are key voters. and their frustration is adding pressure on US leaders to rethink their approach when countries hit each other with tariffs. It's not just businesses that feel the pain. Everyday people do too, through higher prices on goods, from electronics and clothing to food and household items. The cost of many products has gone up because of the trade war. Businesses facing higher import costs often pass those expenses on to consumers. For example, smartphones that rely on Chinese-made parts are now more expensive. Groceries that used to